A note to our listeners before we get started. This series delves into sensitive material and contains disturbing content. Please take care while listening.
The eyes of the world are on Australia this morning after Parliament passed sweeping world-first laws overnight, banning children and teenagers from social media. The move means anyone under the age of 16 will be blocked from using TikTok, Instagram...
Australia's new social media ban for kids is raising new questions about implementation and ripple effects. The law gives Facebook, Reddit, X, Instagram and others a year to get users under 16.
Today, are teens in Australia about to get kicked off social media? Parents across the world know this predicament. Social media networks...
It's not really a pure ban. It's really a social media age restriction bill. And so what I'll have to require that the companies will have to be able to identify all of their under 16 users and remove those accounts. They will have to put in systems in place to prevent under 16s from having an account. And I will have to develop the reasonable steps. And the penalties are quite high, about 50 million. So we're not telling the companies how they do it. We are just telling them that they're no longer absolved of responsibility for their platforms carrying this content. And these standards come into force in December of this year.
Let me tell you what they say to people like us when journalists ask them to account for this problem and the criticisms that are levied by people like you. Here's what they say. This is the typical response, which I'm sure you've heard before. We care deeply about the protection of children. It is
It's our top priority.
A top priority. We have developed, towards that end, we've developed a number of technologies, including age verification and detection of potential predatory conduct. And while no one is perfect and the system is not foolproof, we continue to work rigorously and tirelessly because we are seized of this issue and we are working towards a safer future with children squarely in mind. How do you decipher that?
Oh, I used to deliver those talking points myself, but I felt that in the early days at Microsoft, I could deliver them because I could see that they were genuinely doing things and they were investing in things. And this is precisely what our transparency reports have shown. They're not doing nearly enough. They have the capability, they have the technology, they have the know-how, they have the brain power. They most certainly have the vast financial resources. No one is really holding them to account.
I'm Robert Cribb, and this is Arachnia.
Hi there.
Hello.
Let me turn on. My daughter just had a slumber party in here. Let me see if I can go somewhere else, away from the noise. That's really annoying.
That's Julie Inman Grant, Australia's e-safety commissioner. She's a global leader in tackling online harm.
Okay, great.
Her job is to hold tech giants accountable, to protect kids from online abuse, and to make the digital world a little bit safer. In effect, she's Australia's social media ban enforcer. And her daughters kind of hate her for it.
I think maybe one day they'll say, proud mom that you stood up. Mostly though I get, Mom, are you really gonna take Snap and Instagram away from me and my friends? But listen, and then I'm able to talk to them, and it's funny how a 12-year-old can be really, say things that move you. Mom, this is our generation. This is how we communicate. This is how we entertain ourselves. This is, if you take this away, where does that leave us?
Inman Grant has been on both sides of this story. She's working in public service now, but before that, she worked at Microsoft. In fact, she was part of Hani Farid's team that helped to develop photo DNA. But then things started to change for her.
Photo DNA was an amazing invention, and without it, who knows where we would be. And Microsoft still licenses it, but after 15 years, there's only a few hundred companies in the world that are using this technology.
Just give me a sense of the chronology. So when did it turn? When did you become frustrated?
I think when as a company that practiced what we called SD3, security by design, default and deployment, and privacy by design, I was frustrated when I tried to bring safety by design to deal with personal harms. And I was told, no, that's not really in our interest because we're becoming an enterprise company and enterprise customers care about privacy and security, not safety. That's when I kind of realized I'd push as much as I could as a safety antagonist inside the company. And I had a great experience. And in the 2010s, Microsoft it formed a digital crimes unit, which still exists today. It invested a lot in law enforcement training, but it just changed its focus and safety became really a subsidiary issue at the time. So then I moved back to Australia, and my Twitter story is interesting but different, and I certainly saw and experienced some very different safety issues in the context of social media.
Safety by design, as Inman Grant describes it, means online protection shouldn't be an afterthought. It's about anticipating risks, detecting harm before it spreads. She wants to build digital spaces with protections embedded from the start. So why isn't that the standard? Is this really about money?
You've been privy to conversations and attitudes behind closed doors. What is the answer? Is it really as craven as we imagine it to be, that they're saying it's just not good business to protect children, so we're not going to do it?
They would never say it that brazenly, particularly to a regulator, but I remember being in a room with very, very senior executives talking about the metaverse and putting forward a proposal around safety by design. How can we get ahead of these issues? And I remember one of the executives saying, why are we even talking about safety and privacy? We haven't even figured out interoperability and how to make a profit around this yet. And, I was like, well, you don't build a city in a desert, not understanding where the water sources are, where you're going to put the sewage. You make it safe by design. You don't go there and then figure it out later when all this bad stuff happens. But unfortunately, that's the modus operandi of the technology industry. That's the way they think. It's about getting first to market and fixing the problems later, if at all.
I understand, obviously, the financial economic benefits of things like addictive algorithms and drawing eyeballs to screens. That's the bread and butter of these organizations and their whole economic framework. What I don't understand in terms of economic motivation is the dark stuff that we're talking about now, the child sex abuse material. So what's going on? Why are so few companies using technology that can address this problem, which everybody to a person will agree is vitally important? It represents a threat to our children. There's no other side to this argument, and yet when presented with the technology that can at least begin to address it, nobody seems to be interested in implementing it.
First of all, I'd say we are partners with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, and my investigators, we also serve as the hotline for Australia, and my investigators spend hours every week helping the Canadian Centre classify a lot of the images that are captured by Arachnid. It's an amazing technology, and it actually does show that when you think about first-generation content that's out there, that's what's being created every day, it really makes you realize how vast this problem is. But when we used our transparency powers, we found a couple of key things. Apple, of course, who prides itself on privacy, does not have any reporting options whatsoever for the public for child sexual abuse material. and they do not scan or detect child sexual abuse material. So that explains why they only made 267 reports of child sexual abuse to NCMEC, whereas Meta made something like 27 million.
So you're saying that Apple is consciously wearing blinders to the problem in an effort not to see it?
Absolutely. In fact, in some discovery in their litigation with Epic, an email from an executive said, we're the best place to hide child sexual abuse material because we don't know where it is. It's a form of willful blindness. And so, Apple probably was the worst. They're doing nothing to detect, nothing to do in terms of scanning, and they don't provide reporting features. So we've been pushing them very hard on reporting. So we did this initial analysis 2 years ago. Twitter at the time refused to comply at all, despite the fact that Elon Musk said that child sexual abuse was its top priority. So we actually issued them a service provider notification and sent them an infringement notice. They've responded by, we're in seven different legal cases with them, but they've required a judicial review. And in the federal court said that because they were Twitter when we issued the notification, the requirement to provide transparency about how they're attacking child sexual abuse when they were Twitter incorporated in Delaware, because they became X under Nevada merger law, that they ceased to exist and were no longer responsible. So our federal court found that that was a specious argument and found against them and costs. But X Corp is appealing that decision, so we'll be going back to court. But it just sort of shows you, again, the continued willful blindness to one of the most heinous and largely illegal acts that there is, but they're somewhat protected from the lax laws in the United States.
One of the problems with being a leader and pushing new boundaries is you become the source of great attention and adversarialism. And that certainly happened with you. You have poked the bear. You have become a bullseye for people like Elon Musk, which is a fascinating place to be and no doubt uncomfortable at times. You've talked a little bit about what comes with that. What has this been like to find yourself as a leading voice, contrarian voice, against people who are richer than God? What's that like?
I mean, I made a decision about a video of a bishop that was being live streamed who was stabbed in the eye, in the face, in the neck by a radicalized teenager. And this came 2 days after 7 women and a security guard were killed in a Bondi shopping mall through a knife attack. So we were at a moment, every time there's a terrorist event, our investigators mobilize and we work with the companies to make sure that what we call Class 1 content doesn't go viral. So we worked with every company, and the 2 companies where we were concerned it was going viral were Facebook and X Corp. So I issued formal removal notices to both, and their responses couldn't have been more different. Meta complied within the hour and kept us up to speed on how they were preventing the upload. And, Elon said, F you, you're the Australian censorship commissar. We're an unelected bureaucrat. You're trying to censor the global internet, and essentially issued a dog whistle to 200 million of his users. So, and he's created astroturfing fronts with organizations that, have resulted in a 3,000% increase in FOIs and 7 different cases challenging us on everything. So they're trying to tie us up in knots.
The environment got hostile, and X-users started to attack.
They've doxed my children. That means putting my children's names out on the internet. I get death threats. I have to change my movements. I need police protection in some situations. So I didn't enter into this situation expecting any of this at all, but I have a job to do, and that is to protect the online safety of Australians. And I know the whole idea is to drive me out of this job, to drive me out of the public spaces. And in some ways, that emboldens me more to continue doing what is right and fighting hard.
We wrote to the big tech companies that we discussed with Inman Grant and other critics in this podcast: Snapchat, Microsoft, Meta, as well as Apple. We wanted to talk to them directly, or at least get their response to questions about child sexual abuse material and their approach to it. None of the companies wished to go on tape, but most of them did send a statement, read here by some of our producers. Inman Grant's former employer, Microsoft, sent us this response from Courtney Gregoire, the Chief Digital Safety Officer.
Microsoft has a long-standing commitment to child safety online and to addressing child sexual exploitation and abuse, or CSEA, risks on our services. We prohibit this content and take proactive steps to deter, detect, and disrupt CSEA. With AI and other technologies evolving, a dynamic and multi-stakeholder approach remains essential to addressing this harm.
Meta offered this written statement.
Child exploitation is a horrific crime, and the suggestion that we're failing to act is fundamentally false. For over a decade, we've worked aggressively to fight it on our apps and support law enforcement in Canada and around the world in prosecuting the criminals behind it. We prevent adults who have shown potentially suspicious behavior from interacting with teens and share signals of violating accounts with other platforms so they can take action too. Our sophisticated technology, including the image matching technology we made available to industry in 2019, helps us detect and report more instances of child exploitation to the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children than any of our peers.
As for Snapchat, they sent us the following.
Child sexual exploitation is an abhorrent crime, and we are committed to working with law enforcement to keep such heinous activity off our platform and bring criminals to justice. As criminals change their tactics to avoid detection, we evolve our approach to combat these harms. We continue to invest in technology to enhance proactive detection and work to swiftly identify and remove content that violates our community guidelines.
We wrote to Apple on numerous occasions to ask for an interview or a response to statements made in this series. They did not respond. We reached out to X to address ongoing criticism about their handling of illicit child sexual abuse imagery. We also asked for comment about Elon Musk's very public criticism of Inman Grant. When X didn't respond to our email communications, we sent a registered letter in a further attempt to reach someone at the company who would respond to our query. They did sign for the letter, but we have not heard back.
You know, I know a lot of people consider this kind of regulation paternalistic, but, you know, we do need to protect the most vulnerable. And as you noted, these technology companies are more powerful and are richer than many nation states. And their powers have largely been unbridled. And I think you could probably say with the most recent US election, their power has been further entrenched.
So can you just, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but these are death threats that come to you in telephone calls or emails, or like, give us a sense.
All of the above.
What do they say?
I try not to engage with them too much. One of them was really about, if you don't leave the country, I know where you work, I will be waiting for you, I will kill you. If you, and this is someone who's been making these threats for more than 2 years. But really it was, you know, I've got 12-year-old kids that take the bus to school on their own, the public bus. That's what worries me the most. Like, there are some really unhinged people out there, and there have been some credible death threats that the police have had to look into. You just sort of think, I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize my kids.
The predators are out there, and it seems they're often beyond the reach of the law. There are hackers who come across child sexual abuse material, and they try to do the right thing by reporting it to authorities. But even that often fails. A young hacker who tried to expose Paul's alleged abuser got nowhere. The evidence was tossed out because the hacker was underage. In the end, Paul's alleged abuser faced no criminal penalties after orchestrating what Paul calls the worst moments of his life. Consider that for a moment. No penalty. 1 day in jail, time served. Incredible.
I know where he is.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things I do is I deliver food because it's one of those things I can choose to do and take time off. And I literally got a delivery for him.
No.
I'm not even joking. And this is recent, by the way. This is very recent. This is a big thing right now, and I have to figure out how to navigate that.
So you're working for a food delivery company, and you get an order. What happens?
It just says his name, that name, which is a common name, could be anybody, but different initial. So I don't think anything of it. I go and deliver it, and I didn't even really put it together till like when I saw that logo. When I saw the logo, and I was like, I saw the name, and I looked at the logo, and I was like, wow.
Logo on the building.
Yes, and it's the exact same logo he had for his video production company. One of the jobs he also did was he would do pictures for weddings and things like this and videos for them. He had a video production company that was his. It's the exact same logo. Same colors, everything is the exact same. He didn't even change it at all. Things in my life happen in a specific way and they point me to specific things. And I don't know why. It brought me directly to him.
So you're sitting outside this company.
Yeah. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to comprehend it. Oh, I brought him the food. Yeah, that's it. And I left.
Was he the one that actually received the food?
Yeah.
It was him?
It was him, yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
You looked him in the eyeball?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Did he know who you were?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think so. But maybe. Which means it's time for me to do it.
Do what?
It wouldn't have. I have to face him. I have to look him in the eyes. I have to try to speak with him. I have to try to understand. It wouldn't have happened unless I was supposed to. But I have to figure out how to approach that and what I'm supposed to do. I know what his personality is. I know what type of person he is. So it scares me a bit. But at the same time, and it's not that he scares me, it's that I scare me.
At the individual level, can a child sex offender be cured? Have you cured them?
No. No, they cannot be cured.
Earlier in this series, we introduced you to Michael Burke. He's a clinical forensic psychologist and a criminal profiler. For more than 3 decades, he's worked with offenders in county jails and state and federal prisons, studying the minds of the people behind these horrific crimes. He's reached a terrifying conclusion. Those who do this to children are largely beyond rehabilitation.
I can't change pedophilia. I can't change fetishes, voyeurism, exhibitionism, sadism, psychopathy, and neither can anyone else in my field. We have no way of curing a peeping Tom, a flasher, a child molester, a rapist, a serial killer, There is no cure. There's no talk therapy. There's no medication. There's no surgery. But the only thing we have in our toolbox is a hope and some research that if we apply a cognitive behavioral relapse prevention model and we put people who have these predilections into that program, that we might be able to keep them from acting out on those fantasies. We can't change the fantasies, but if we can help them not act out on that impulse, then we've rescued a child.
When predators do act on their impulses, it falls to law enforcement officials to try and stop them before they act, often in real time. Janelle Blackadar, the investigator with the Toronto Police Service, is one of Canada's best.
I was in the drug squad, and my boss at the time basically said, "Where do you want to go?" And the only place I wanted to go was child exploitation. And so happy that I did it. I can remember the first time I'd sent a case, and it was probably about 2 years after me being online and getting the results that we believed we'd rescued a child. And I've always lived with that concept of, if I had not done my job, then this impact on this child's life, the trauma, the abuse, would have continued.
So a good day for you guys, presumably, is a bust, a charge laid, yeah? Is there a day that sticks out for you? What's your best day?
July 22nd, 2015, best and worst day. And I'd been doing a project with Homeland Security, specifically Special Agent Austin Barrier. And it was basically a bunch of like-minded people that would congregate online in a space where they could share CSAM or child sexual abuse material. But at times, they engaged in the abuse. And it just happened on this day. I ended up not going to a housewarming party. I was walking into the office when they were all getting ready to leave and asked me if I wanted to go. And I was like, no. There were concerning messages that was coming in. And I was worried that there was going to be an abuse. And when I turned my screen back on, it was in the middle of it.
You were undercover, presumably, so you were able to access this imagery because they thought you were a pedophile.
Yes.
So you had access to a live feed.
Yes.
So you were actually witnessing live the abuse of this child.
Yes. So it was that moment of, I've got to capture this. This is a crime that's happening. I've got to get the evidence. And then when the event ended, of course, right away I called Austin, told him what had happened, and needed his help to help me trace him because we knew he was in the United States, specifically in a certain state. And by the time I got my reports, my screenshots done, it was maybe 2 hours. By the time I got home, which is about an hour and a bit drive, Austin had identified the family. And the next morning at 6 o'clock, he was rescued. So, yeah.
Why is that so emotional for you? Why that one?
Well, it was my first time, and I apologize, with a hands-on abuse, but it's not so much just the circumstance. Again, it's like what I'd said, if I hadn't been there, it would have continued. And unfortunately, in this particular case, information didn't reach the right law enforcement agency, and he'd been being abused violently for 2 years before that. So, and it was looking at all the evidence in the prosecution and all of that, that I was just so grateful that we were able to rescue him. And these are tears of sadness. We made a difference for that child and his family. So they're actually tears of emotional gratitude that I was in that position. I had people that executed that lead right away. And I mean, this came out in court, so it's nothing that I can't talk about. So yeah, it was just, that's probably the biggest day.
Have you been vicariously traumatized?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. And I'm very careful about, what I will allow myself to be exposed to. I'm very careful about that.
I want to come back to Dr. Sharon Cooper for a second. She's the forensic pediatrician we heard from in our last episode. She can relate to Janelle's emotional reaction, telling a story that she's told many times over.
I went to a conference in Toronto several years ago when an occupational therapy nurse presented. And she came over and she said, we wanted to find out about these images and were they traumatizing investigators? And we decided to compare them to homicide investigators. So she did, a whole bunch of screens for PTSD and initially with these two populations of investigators. And then 18 months later, she repeated it. And she was really shocked to discover that sexual exploitation investigators were far more traumatized than the homicide investigators. And she was trying to figure out why that was. And she talked to a bunch of psychological people, and they said, well, when somebody's dead, they're dead. And you can step away, you can objectify that. But when you're looking at images of children who are being sexually abused, number one, and you don't know who they are, and you have not rescued them, you just know that they're out there, that is far more traumatizing because you go to sleep every night, with that on your brain.
So you've become an advocate. You're a vocal spokesperson for victims. One of the things I hear again and again from those in that space, including the folks at the Canadian Centre, is that this is a tough issue to get on the public radar for reasons that seem evasive to me. Clearly, we all care deeply about our children. We care deeply about children's safety. We hear about it all the time. But there's something about this issue that keeps it off the front pages. It keeps it out of the water cooler discussions. It's not something that we think about or talk about in our society, generally speaking. Why do you think that is?
Well, for one reason, it's aversive. It's very aversive to speak about sexual abuse images. But there's another piece to it, and that is that it's so aversive that they shun it. They just don't even want to have it around them because it's too hard for them psychologically to deal with. And I appreciate that, because I have a lot of really smart colleagues, but they are very intimidated by abusive images because they're just psychologically so aversive for them. And that's also true for investigators. There are not a lot of investigators that spend their whole career in this particular space because it's, once again, too psychologically problematic for them.
The sadists are the ones I had the most trouble with. They have an uncanny ability because they're so adept at inflicting pain, emotional pain, that even those of us that have been doing this for a long time, we have to really be on guard with those folks because they have affected me. Every colleague that I know, I don't know anyone that has been able to armor up enough where there hasn't been a sadist that got to them. Their stories are so difficult to hear. I mean, I have put it in this way, and some of my professional colleagues don't like it when I use this term. I say that I'm sitting across from evil, that I'm in the presence of evil. And some people say, oh, that's not a professional term. And I say, well, then find me another one. Because psychopathy doesn't cover it. And, pedophilia doesn't. Like, these other motivational pathways don't cover it. But when I'm across from someone who is invested and relishes the idea of destroying a small child, it is very difficult to inoculate yourself against evil. And I would also add, this is especially true for my fellow clinicians who have children.
Child sexual abuse material isn't just ruining childhoods, it's ruining lives. Survivors grow up knowing that their darkest moments are still out there, circulating, beyond their control. And yet it continues to spread on a scale we've never seen before. So that's got me wondering, why aren't people screaming about this? Do they think their kids are somehow immune? What do you say to the parents that will say to you, this isn't about me. I do everything right. I'm not worried about this. This isn't a thing that happens to my kids.
Yeah, I have a photograph on the phone that's 2 feet in front of me right now on the table of a young girl and a 25-year-old man. And I show it sometimes in my presentations that I tell a story about why the father was suspicious of this guy. He just basically didn't like that he spent all of his time around children. Emotional over-identification with children is a risk factor. And this father of the little girl didn't really like this guy because he didn't spend any time with adults. And the wife said, you're crazy, you're paranoid. Exactly what you said. We live in a good neighborhood. This is a great community. This is a great coach. And I tell the audience when I show the image up on the PowerPoint and I say that man was arrested 2 weeks after that photograph for aggravated sexual assault of a child. And sometimes there's a victim advocate in the room and says, oh, you shouldn't be showing a picture of the victim. You can see the victim's face. I say, that's not a victim. That's my daughter. And I was that guy. So when parents say, can't happen to me, this is what I do for a living. I've evaluated and treated sex offenders my entire career. And I had I just had a bit of a spider sense around this guy. And, thankfully, he didn't abuse my daughter, but he did abuse somebody's daughter. He did abuse somebody's daughter. And, and it was, it's everywhere. It is literally the man or woman next door. And, they could be anyone, anywhere.
You have kids?
No. Thank God.
You do not?
Yeah. Not because of this, but it's certainly helped.
Really?
Yeah. I am terrified. By the way, I'm terrified for all my friends who have kids online. I think it's terrifying.
We're starting to see lawsuits show up everywhere. Big lawsuits for a lot of money. And so there's going to be a reckoning at some point. The train has left the station.
That's coming up next time on the finale of Arachnid. Arachnid was reported by me, Rob Cribb, and Wendy Ann Clark from the Investigative Journalism Bureau. Written and produced by Bruce Edwards and Suzanne Reber. Allison Leighton Brown composed our theme and original music. Mix and sound design by Bruce Edwards. Data sonification by Michael Corey. Field recordings by Shahryar Tajvidi and Bruce Edwards. And Jasmine El-Kurd designed our artwork. Arachnid was created by our executive producer Suzanne Reber. Our show is a production of TVO Today in collaboration with Pitt's Gloria Productions, the Investigative Journalism Bureau, and the Toronto Star. Our TVO team includes Shahryar Tajvidi, senior showrunner, Lori Few, executive producer of digital, John Ferry, vice president of programming and content, and thanks to JP Fozo and Sean Pattenden, my audio colleagues at the Toronto Star. If you appreciate listening to Arachnid and believe in this kind of deeply reported and immersive storytelling, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for listening.